Now, coming off the previous training video, you'll notice that this pivot table is a bit different. I tweaked it because I want to analyze the data in a different way. In any case, there it is. Now, when I click outside of the pivot table, the field list over to the right disappears. When I select a cell within it, it reappears. That is, unless I come over here and close out of it, then you're like, uh-oh, how do I bring it back? Come up here and click on the Analyze tab, go to the Show Group, and there it is, Field List, and it's back. Now, there are a few things that you can do to customize your pivot table that I think you may find helpful. In any case, here they are. One thing you can do is that you can group your labels together, that is, if they're groupable. In other words, let's say that I want to go ahead and index my labels here, all the M's under the letter M, F's, and so on. To group my labels, go ahead and you can control-click each label. Let me try again. Control-click each label, and then come up here on the Analyze tab to the Group, and click on Group Selection, and there you go, it grouped all the M's together. Or, let me hit Undo. You can click and drag from one label down to the next. If I had 5 labels, I'd select all 5 of them, and then you can go ahead and group. It does the same thing, there you go. A couple things happened. Well, first of all, it grouped all the M's together that I wanted, but also it grouped all the others. Because by default, Excel doesn't allow you to just group one set of labels. It's all or nothing. So what did it do with the other labels? It grouped them. Under what name? By the same name as the row name. So the group name for family campers is family campers and all weather sports and so on. The other thing is that, notice over here in the field list, that the rows we have company and company 2. Where did company 2 come from? Well, the row labels, the default name for that field is company. You can see it's right there. So when we added a group name, it just copied or duplicated that. Because remember, it's all or nothing, so it just said fine. Since you didn't want to group these others, I'll just go ahead and copy the company name and just group the same name there. In any case, you can come over here and rename that field by clicking on the drop-down arrow for company 2 and clicking on field settings and saying, oh, this is my group or my index, whatever makes sense to you, and click OK or hit enter. And you can see it up here, index. You can uncheck it to remove it, check it to add it. Okay, once you add it, it goes down at the bottom of the hierarchical structure, so let me click and drag it up. So it's up at the top, so we're back to where we started here. So there's the name. Now I want to go ahead and index it and say, okay, all weather, you're under the A's. Let's see, family campers begins with F, under the F's. Go ahead and select the group name, come up here in the formula bar, and then type in A, hit enter, and family campers, F, enter, group 1, generic, I know, M, and then scouting sports, S, hit enter, there you go. Another thing you can do is you can do some custom calculations. You can do it for the group or separately. I'll show you both ways. Now, if you do it for the group, there is a disclaimer on how it calculates, and let me show you. If you go ahead and right-click on a group label, a group name, and you go down to field settings and you say, okay, for this group, the custom name versus the source name, its original name, I want to go ahead and say, let's do the count for that group. It's not going to do it for the actual group within it, but for the entire company name or all weather sports. See if this makes sense. There's count, click okie dokie, and it counts up 13 cells that contain numbers. That doesn't make sense because I only count 3. It's not counting what you see here, it's counting what's back in the database here for all weather sports. So it counts up all those cells that contain numbers here, which is all 13, and that's what it says down below, 13, and that's what we get over here, 13. So keep that in mind if you want to do some custom calculations as far as the groups go. In any case, let me go ahead and right-click to Field Settings, and let's say None, and click Okie dokie. And then if you want to go ahead, in this example, we've got the quantity. If we multiply it by the price, we'd get the total, right? I mean, I have the total there. Let me go ahead and add the price. Okay, so multiply the quantity times the price, we get the total. We can add the total, it's already there. But if you don't have it, and it's not in your worksheet here, in other words, to bring over as a choice, then you can go ahead and insert a custom calculation that will multiply both those fields. You can do that by coming up here, clicking on the Analyze tab, going to the Calculations group, clicking on Field Items and Sets, going to Calculated Field, and you can name that field whatever you want. We can call it, let's delete it, Total, and then down below we can do the price each, double click on it, And then the asterisk is multiplied by quantity, double click and click okie dokie. And then it gives me a warning. It says we can't do this because you have another field that's called total. Let me click and drag. Is it over here? Yes. Okay. We'll call it total totals. And then go ahead and click okie dokie, and there we go. So let's see if it checks out. What's 4 times 19? Is that 76? Well, let's do equals 4 times 19, enter. Hey, it checks out. Let me go ahead and select the cell so we can bring up our field list. Now, if you want to add subtotals to your groups or get the grand total if you don't have it, or hide the grand total, then come up here and click on the Design tab, go to the Layout group, and there you go, Subtotals. Do you want them at the bottom of the group or at the top? Let's do the bottom. Scroll down. There's the total for Mirror Lake Sports, 58, and then 270. The total for that is 328. Okay, checks out. Let's go ahead and click on it to not show it. And then the grand totals, let me scroll down. I've got them for the column here, and that's one of the options. You can have it for columns only or for rows, or you can go ahead and turn it off and it disappears if you don't want to show them. And don't forget your styles. If you want to go ahead and change it from the default style when you inserted the pivot table, come up here on the Design tab, there you go, expand it, and you can hover over it to get a preview of it and also see the name of it. This one's Pivot Style Light 24. That's okay. Let's go ahead and choose something else. Ooh, I like that one. And then if you want to go ahead and print this off, there are a few things you can do to set it up for printing or to make it look good when it comes out on the printer here. And that is, let me go ahead and scroll up. You can come up here on the Design tab to the Layout group. If you want to give it some space in between the items, click on the Blank Rows drop-down arrow to insert blank line after each item. Select it, and it gives us some buffer there, makes it not so tight. Also, when it comes to the report filter, do we need to see that here, the salesperson and the date? Because if we don't, then we can go ahead and click and drag and move them off to remove them, or click on the drop-down arrow to remove. And that way it doesn't come out on the printer. I mean, what's the point if they can't see what is being filtered there? And then finally, what about that field header, row labels? What does that mean? We can remove that if we want by clicking on the Analyze tab, going to the Show group, and deselecting field headers, and it disappears. Now we're ready for print. File, Backstage to print. What you see here is what's coming out of the printer. Pivot table slicers, or a slicer, is a quicker way to filter your data in a pivot table. In other words, if I insert a field here as a slicer, like the salesperson, it'll have a list of all the salespeople as buttons within a small slice of a window pane, if you will, that I can quickly click on to filter for that salesperson, as opposed to clicking on the drop-down arrow, unchecking, and then checking one of the salespersons to filter in for. It takes too much time. In any case, to go ahead and insert a slicer or slicers, you can come up here and click on the Insert tab, go to the Filters group because it is a filter, click on Slicer, brings up the window, let me close out, or if you have a cell selected anywhere within the pivot table, you can also come up to its related Contextual Analyze tab and then go to its filter group and click on Insert Slicer. You can see it brings up the same window. And then go ahead and check those fields that you want to insert a slicer for, to filter for, like salesperson, product, and total, and click okie dokie, and there you go. Now I'm going to go ahead and organize these by hovering over the top part, the title bar of each slicer until I can see a four-way arrow, then click and drag it over and over to not have them stacked. Now that doesn't mean that you still can't filter the old school way, which is coming over here in the pivot table and clicking on the drop down arrow, unchecking, and then checking what you want to filter in and clicking OK. That works, but keep in mind that these slicers are connected to that pivot table. So what you filter there, it'll display the results of it also over in these slicers. Let me go ahead and close out of the field list so I can see that other slicer. So how do I know just by looking at the slicers which field has been filtered? Because I only filtered one, and that was a salesperson, and I can tell by looking in the pivot table what I filtered for by looking at the arrow and seeing if there's a funnel. If there's a funnel there, that means that I filtered for that field. I didn't do it for the date or for the company. So how can I tell by looking at the slicers here? Just look in the top right hand corner for the funnels there. Notice that this one is bold with the red X. These other two are faded. The faded ones means that I haven't selected either in the slicer or over in the pivot table, in this case a person there for that salesperson field. So you can see that Bob Appleman, when we filter for his name, The results over here says that he sold fort, tent, screen tent, tiki torch, and you can see the results there of the products he sold. Now this is the quantity and this is the total in sales, the dollar amounts, so we're not going to compare those. And of course on different dates here. And I could bring up the date slicer if I want. Again, you can come back up here, insert, filter, slicer, check the date, but I'm going to keep it simple. Let's close out. And to go ahead and reset this, I can either click on the drop down arrow and check all, or since these are connected, I can go ahead and hover over that filter there and it gives me the option to clear it. Click on it and we're back to where we started. Now, doing it that way is a bit slower than just coming over here and selecting it and boom, automatically filters. I didn't have to click down, uncheck, and check. And if I want to do multiple filters within the same field, hold down the control key and click on the others and give them a second or two to update, and there you go. I'm going to go ahead and select one. And when I do that, so there's the filter for Brett Hume. Here are the results, and here are the results over here in the slicers. And then over in the slicers, if I want to do more than just filtering for one field, let's also say Brett Hume sold campfire bags. Let's focus on that. And there's his total there. Now notice the different colors of buttons here. We've got the dark blue, then we have the faded blue, and then we have the white with dark text and the white with faded text. Let me break it down. The dark blue buttons are those that have been selected or are filtered in. In other words, we selected these two, so they're going to be dark blue. This other one we didn't select, but it was filtered in because it met the other two's conditions or criteria. So it had to be Brett Hume, and it had to be a campfire bag, and total said, oh, hey, I meet both of those, and here's the total for the campfire bag that Brett Hume sold. Now, I could go ahead and select it, and then it brings up the clear filter field. I'll go ahead and clear it. It doesn't matter. It still meets the criteria whether I select it or just leave it as is. So there's the dark blue, the results of selecting it, or that it's the result of meeting the conditions set by the other filters, the other slicers that we filtered for. Then the faded blue here is that it's part of a group that was selected but not meeting the other slicers filter criteria. So that met it, but these didn't, so they're light blue. And then we've got the white buttons with the dark text, meaning that it was unselected or not filtered in, but it meets the condition of the other one that we have filtered for. Now see if this makes sense because it works both ways. When I selected Brett Hume, it went over to the product, as you recall, before we filtered it, and it said, let me clear it, it says, okay, he sold these three here. When I selected campfire bag, it's still saying over here in the products that even though you selected that, we still have the other two that are going to be in dark text that he sold. But because you didn't select it, it still, well, fits with what you have selected, but because you're not filtering for it, we'll just display it as dark text to let you know that he still made sales in other areas. You just don't want us to filter for it, so we'll display it in dark text. And those sales that he didn't make for these products, they'll be faded, which is good to know because if I go down this road or this branch and I go, he did okay there, he better make up for it in sales in other areas or other products. What other products did he sell? I can quickly look over here and go, oh, let me look for those buttons that are displaying dark text. And that way I don't have to start over again to find out by clearing the filter here to find out which three he made sales on. I can just select one of them and the other two that are in dark text he made sales on. I just need to go ahead and select it to filter for. There we go. Now keep in mind this is for the default style that I have for my slicers. So when I go ahead and I select one here and I come up to its related contextual options tab, go ahead and choose a style and go purple for salespeople. Product will be orange and total can be green. I mean, it's still the same concept. The dark purple is going to be what you selected or it's filtered in, the result of what you have selected. You can see over here, those are the results of these two filters there. When you're done, you can go ahead and click on clear, clear, and we're back to where we started. Well, just look at that splash of color. Now, if you want to go ahead and connect these slicers to another pivot table, so in other words, you can hit two birds with one stone, wherein when you select Bob Appelman, not only will it filter for this pivot table, but if you have another pivot table, it can filter for him as well. So let's go ahead and insert another pivot table by using the same database here on sheet 1. Click anywhere within the database, come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, click on Pivot Table, and let's do a new worksheet, click Okie dokie, and that becomes sheet 5. So sheet 5 is my second pivot table, and let's go ahead and add salesperson, company, date. product, quantity, and of course I may want to rearrange this here. Let's do salesperson up here, date below that. So we can come down here on the worksheet 5 and just call it P2 for pivot table 2. And then sheet 1, we'll just double click and call it P1 for pivot table 1. And then sheet 1 here is going to be our database. Hit enter. Okay. Now there's two ways you can connect a pivot table to a slicer. You can do it one by selecting a slicer here and then coming up to its related contextual options tab, go to the slicer group and click on report connections. You can see here that pivot table 1 on sheet 1 is already connected to, and then you can check it and say connect it to the pivot table on sheet 2 or P2, which is the name of the sheet there, and click okie dokie and it's connected. Or the other way, and probably quicker way, if you want like the pivot table on pivot table 2 worksheet connected to all these slicers that are open and available, select a cell anywhere within the pivot table, then come up here and click on the Analyze tab, go to the filter group, click on Filter Connections, and it says select the filters, that are slicers, to connect to this pivot table. Now we already connected one of the slicers, which is a salesperson. You can quickly check the others to connect them all and click okie dokie. So either way will work. It just depends on if you want to do it for all of them. I think that's the quicker way than to do it by one slicer at a time. So if I go back to pivot table 1, the worksheet, and I do it for Bob Appleman, then when I go to pivot table 2, it should be filtered just for Bob Appleman. Cool. So they're all connected. Now, how could that be a benefit? Why would I want two separate pivot tables based upon the same database if they're showing the same things? Well, that's the point. You may not want to show the same things. You may want to go ahead and have additional fields here, or maybe just a couple of fields that are tied to the slicers here that you can analyze on two separate worksheets, or of course you can insert the pivot table on the same worksheet as the first pivot table, but it gets a little squishy for me, so that's why I put them on two separate worksheets, and be able to have a second way of analyzing your data from the same database and not be locked into just a set of fields, what you see here, but you can put some here and put from the same database other fields here, with a few that will link between the two. So if we want to connect them both to the same slicer, when we filter, it filters for both tables there. And then of course to disconnect, you can go ahead and select the slicer, come up here, click on the options tab, go to the report connections, disconnect it from the pivot table 1 or the first one we have on P1 sheet, or from P2. Or again, if you want to do it across the board, it's easier to go ahead and select a cell within the pivot table on pivot table 1 or pivot table worksheet 2 and come up here, analyze, go to filter connections, and then uncheck it for that pivot table that you selected. Now there's an option that you can prevent slicers from moving or resizing with cells, and to go ahead and look at these options, select a slicer and then come up here, click on the options tab. You can go to the size group, and when you hover over the expandable dialog box button, it's not just the size but also the properties, that when you click on it, it expands the task pane for that slicer, or when it closes out, you can of course right click on the slicer, and there it is, size and properties, brings up the same task pane. Go ahead and turn down properties, and you can see that the default is to move but don't size with cells. Now what that means is that if I resize the cells here, it would actually resize the slicer, but because it says you can move it but don't resize it, they won't be resized. What does it mean by move? Well, if I come up here, let me right click on column G and insert, it shifts over the slicer, it moves it. When I go ahead and click and drag and resize a cell, it doesn't resize the slicer. Let me go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. So when I have a slicer selected, that's what it means. You can go ahead and have the slicers move and size, or just have it move but don't size, or don't move or size with the cells. So whenever I go ahead and adjust the cell's height or width, it doesn't adjust with it. When I insert or delete a range of cells, it doesn't move the slicer with it. So let me go ahead and show you when you have move and size with cells selected. So if I go ahead and click and drag this out, let me drag that out, there you go. It's got to be within the range here, so it actually resizes the slicer there when I click and drag one of the column headers, or do it for the row header. Oh, that's horrifying. Just look at that. Let's go ahead and undo. Let's go back to the default here. I guess it might be okay to move it with it, or just simply say don't move or size no matter what I do to the cells. And then finally, to remove the slicer, it's pretty easy. Let's just go ahead and close out of here. You can right click on the slicer and say remove, or you can go ahead and select it, hit the delete key, delete, and then of course you may want to restore this back to all if you forgot to do that, and click okie dokie to restore it. And then pivot table 2 is still there. Click on the drop down arrow, select multiple, choose all. If you want to use multiple items, and click okie dokie, and we're back to where we started, to where nothing's now filtered. A pivot chart is a way to analyze your data using an interactive chart, and it's based upon a pivot table. In other words, you cannot create a pivot chart without the pivot table. There are two ways you can create a pivot chart. If you already got a pivot table, then just go ahead and select any cell within the pivot table. Come up here and click on the Analyze tab. Go to the Tools group and click on Pivot Chart. And then go ahead and choose one. I'm going to go with this one and double click. And there you go. Of course, let me close out of the field list. Click and drag the chart over. Hover over the bottom right hand corner handle, resizing handle, and then click and drag that out so we can see more of it. And click and drag the right middle handle. And you can see the companies, and the companies had made purchases for these products. And here are the totals and sales here, which isn't too bad. Hopefully it's in millions of dollars. In any case, there's the pivot chart. And you can go ahead and analyze it interactively with these fields that it's based upon over here. You can see the salesperson is a filter field. You can click on the drop down arrow and say, look, I just want to go ahead and see the sales for Bob Appleman. Click okie dokie. And he made sales for mountain camping, and what he sold to them was the fort tent, screen tent, and tiki torch. You can see the funnels there, but also the funnels next to the interactive field on the pivot chart. You can click on the drop down arrow, also make the selection there as well, and click okie dokie, and we're back to where we started. You can also, just like when we learned in formatting our charts in earlier training video, even though it's a pivot chart, it's still a chart, so you can still add access titles, format the chart title, even change it. So the default is total. Let's come up here after we have selected it and click in the formula bar and say it's going to be the salesperson's performance. Hit enter and updates the chart title, nifty. You can go ahead and right click on the chart, change the chart type to any other charts you'd like. Come up here, click on the design tab, choose a chart style, change the chart colors, add chart elements. Again, if you want to watch my training video on charts, it's pretty much everything that I would want you to learn there that I'm not going to be covering here because we already covered it. The only difference between a pivot chart and a chart is that, well, with the pivot chart, you can pivot between the data. It's interactive. With the chart, it's not interactive. You don't get these drop-down arrows. Now, like I said, there's more than one way to create a pivot chart. It has to be based upon a pivot table. So since I already had my pivot table, it was easy to create. If I didn't have one and I'm starting from scratch, I can come over here to my data range on sheet 1, select any cell within it, then come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Charts group and click on Pivot Chart, and it selects my range automatically for me. And do I want to add it to a new worksheet or the existing? And the location within this existing worksheet, click on its collapsible dialog box button, choose a cell, hit enter, hit enter. There's the pivot table, it put it there, but I wanted to insert the pivot chart. Remember that you cannot have a pivot chart without the pivot table. That's the reason why I don't insert it within the same worksheet, because I don't feel like I got enough room, at least without having to scroll around and also working with the field list here. So I go ahead and undo that. Let's do it again. Insert pivot chart to a new worksheet, click okie dokie. There we go. Okay, pivot table. Now, when it comes to creating my pivot chart, it says to build it, go ahead and choose fields from the list here. Well, that's easy. Just go ahead and we'll select company, salesperson, and the products that were sold. And while we have all that, we do need a value so we can start charting it. And which fields contain values? Well, we've got the price each for the quantity or the total in sales there. It doesn't look too good. Let me go ahead and rearrange this. Let's click and drag the salesperson. So they're the filter for the report here. And so right now it's set to all salespeople. And then I can go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and let me do select multiple items, uncheck all, do it for Danny DeVito, click okie dokie, and close out. There's the pivot chart. So you got to have a pivot table before you can create the pivot chart. And then once you have the pivot chart, if you want to move your chart, as we learned in our charts training video, you can go ahead and right click and say you want to move it. Now the pivot table and pivot chart don't have to be on the same worksheet. So I can move this chart to a new sheet, and the default name's chart 1. I can rename it and call it Spiffy chart, and then go ahead and click Okie dokie. Whatever I do here, it will obviously filter for, and click Okie dokie. And then of course, whatever I do back in pivot table on sheet 5, it will update that chart as well. So if I just do it for Britt and Danny, click Okie dokie, go back to the Spiffy chart. Well, it's for those salespeople there when I click on the drop down arrow, Britt and Danny DeVito there. So there's all the sales that they made collectively for Family Campers, Mirror Lake Sports, and Mountain Camping, the companies, and the products that were sold to those companies. When it comes to inserting a picture into your worksheet, it's very simplistic. We'll go over some basic modifications of the picture. If you want something more detailed, then I recommend that you watch my PowerPoint training video. By nature, that's a very visual application, so we do more with pictures there, and also shapes and objects. In any case, to go ahead and insert a picture, come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Illustrations group, and click on Pictures. It opens up. Go ahead and browse for your picture, double click on it, and there you go. Let me click and drag the picture. You can see that when I hover over it, I get a 4-way arrow. That means that I can move it in any one of those directions, up, down, left, and right. And then with it selected, you get its related contextual format tab that you got different styles. You can click on the More button. You can have him in a circle, or how about a reflection? Oh, that's always fancy. Select that. Now with that reflection, you get some picture effects that also gives you variations of that reflection. You can also give them a nice warm, glowing warm. Well, let's do orange. Hey, that blends in pretty fancy. And then you also got the resizing handles that when you hover over one of those white boxes until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, you can click and drag it out to stretch them more horizontally or vertically. Let me undo that. Or of course, you can hover over the lower right-hand corner, and when you click and drag, it'll automatically keep it in proportion here. So if I try to go more horizontally by going up, it doesn't do it. Or more vertically by going down and to the left, no, it just keeps it in proportion. So that's good. Of course, if you want to get more detailed about the size of it, seeing it's got to be the exact dimensions of the width and height, maybe the height has to be 3 inches, then of course there's the size group, type in 3, hit enter. Keeps it in proportion. If you don't want it in proportion, click on its expandable dialog box button and it opens up here. Uncheck lock aspect ratio, so when you mess with the height, it won't touch the width. You'll get a more elongated picture here, a more stretched out baby. Let's go ahead and undo that. And then if you want the picture back to its original size, you can come in here and click on Reset. There we go. Let's go ahead and close out. To crop the picture, just come up here on the Format tab, click, well, you can click on the Crop drop-down arrow and you can crop it to a shape if you want, like diamond. Yeah, it's okay. Let me go ahead and undo that. Or just click on the Crop button, and then you can see these black lines around it. So when you hover over one of them, you can see how the 4-way arrow turns into more like a T on its side. That means that when you click and drag and push it in, it'll crop out, in this case, the computer there. And then when you're done, just come back up here, click on the Crop button again, and there we go. Now if I want it back and I don't have the Undo button available, then just go ahead and click on Crop again. And you can see that it's still there. I just can click and drag it back until the entire picture is back, and then go ahead and click Crop again. Or let me go ahead and undo that. And if I click on Crop, and I don't want to eyeball it to get it back to where it was, I want it exactly where it was, then go ahead and expand the group and click on Reset, and it's back to where it was. Now, if you're lacking for images, pictures, audio, or video that you want to insert into your worksheet for whatever reason, maybe it's somebody's birthday, or maybe you want something that's representative of what you're doing in your workbook, like we're out ghost hunting, I like to go ahead and find some ghosts and insert them into my spreadsheet so it can coincide with the database over here with the number of ghosts that we caught on film. In any case, to go ahead and find out what's available that Microsoft has at their Office.com website, you can come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Illustrations group and click on Online Pictures. And there you go, office.com, clip art, royalty-free photos and illustrations. Let's type in ghost, hit enter. Ooh, scare me. Go ahead and select one, click on Insert, and there you go. And we can go ahead and hover over the clip art until I get a four-way arrow, click and drag it down. And as you recall in the previous training video, if you watched it on modifying the picture, it's basically all the same when it comes to pictures, images, clip art, shapes, objects, that when you select one and you learn how to modify that, you can modify any other. So we learn how to modify the picture. Well, this is a picture, but it's actually an illustration. It's the same concept. So if you want to go ahead and resize it, as we learned in the previous training video, just hover over one of the corner resizing handles until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Click and drag to stretch it out. And something different in this video that I'll show you is that if you want to rotate the ghost, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can hover over the free rotation handle up at the top middle, until you can see, well, an arrow circling in on itself. When you click on it, it turns into 4 arrows, meaning that if you move to the right, it tilts right or left. And then if you click on it, hold down the Shift key, it does it in increments of about 15 degrees. You can also come up here on the Format tab to the Arrange group, click on the Rotate Objects drop-down arrow, and you can rotate it or flip it. If you want to flip it, well, there you go. You get the preview before you click on it. Now he's going the other way. And don't forget all the other options that you get as far as we covered in the previous training video, the cropping, sizing, the effects, picture layout, picture styles, and also you can put a twist on the color here if you want to try to make it a little bit more spooky. Maybe blue accent color 5 light. You can also create basic shapes within your worksheet if it calls for it, like arrows, circles, rectangles, squares. In any case, to insert a shape, come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Illustrations group, and click on Shapes, and there you go. Now, if you're looking for a circle or a square, you're not going to find it in here. Instead, you'll find a rectangle and an oval. Now, if you want a circle, select the oval. If you want a square, select the rectangle. I know it doesn't make any sense, at least not now, but trust me. Let's say that we want a circle. Select the oval, and then you'll notice that my pointer is a black cross. When I click and drag, it creates the circle, and if you go ahead and do it down and to the right perfectly, you get the circle. If you go too far to the right and up, you get an elongated oval horizontally or vertically. Now, if you want to do it perfectly and not eyeball it, then hold down the Shift key while you're doing it, and Microsoft will help you out here and give you the perfect circle. Go ahead and let go of the mouse, let go of the Shift key, and sweet. It's also the same for the square. If you come back up here, instead of going to the Insert tab, now that I have my shape inserted, I get the related contextual format tab, so when I want to insert additional shapes, it's nice that it's right here. Go ahead and select the rectangle, click and drag. If I go too far and up, there's an elongated rectangle, and of course too far down to the left. Hold down the Shift key, pops open to the perfect square. Neato. Go ahead and delete that. Select it again so I can get the Format tab back up. Come up here, let's do a star, and then click and drag inside the circle or on top of it. Hold down the Shift key so I can get the perfect proportion, let go. And then as far as color goes, I can do the shape fill here for yellow, and then I can do an outline. Let's see, we can do it in orange. Shape effects, glows, soft edges, or we can do a shape style. Oh, that looks kind of nice, select that. And then if I want to center it, click and drag and try to get it by eyeing it and thinking that's the center. Let me move it over here. You can do it that way, or if you want Microsoft to help you out, select the shape on top, then hold down the Shift key and select the one behind it, so we can come up here on the Format tab to the Arrange group and click on the Align Objects drop-down arrow to align the objects first to the center and then to the middle. And then click off. Oh, my mom would be so proud. The other modifications you can do is that if you want a shape there, but it's not the shape that you want right now, instead of a star, I want it to be something else. Instead of going back through all of that, select the shape, come back up here on the Format tab to the Insert Shapes group, click on Edit Shape to change, and let's do a happy face. That way I didn't have to redraw it to that proportion, it just changed it for me. Let's go ahead and select it and delete it, and then select our shape again. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and add text to my shape. Couple ways you can do it. One's not really adding it. One's, well, let me go ahead and hover over the lower right-hand corner of the circle so I can click and drag on that resizing handle and make it more oval. Then click and drag it, put it on top of the increased profits, and then come up here on the Format tab to the Shape Styles group and click on its expandable dialog box button to bring up the task pane. Expand the fill here, and let's make it transparent. Hey, isn't that neat? Now I can see the text behind it. Now you can do it that way if you have text and you want an object on top of it, make it transparent so you can see the text behind it. Of course, with the grid lines, it doesn't look pretty. You can come up here, click on the Page Layout tab to the Sheet Options and uncheck Grid Lines. Of course, the cells are still there. I just can't see the borders around it. Let me go ahead and add it back in. Now you can do it that way. Let me go ahead and select it. And while I'm here, let's just come over here in the task pane, go to Size and Properties, and let's go to the size and expand it. You can also rotate it here numerically instead of doing it by freehand, as we learned in an earlier training video, that when you hover over the top rotation handle, when you click on it, you can tilt it left or right and go back. If you click on it, hold down the Shift key, you can do it in increments of about 15 degrees or so. You can also come over here and type it in, what you want it to rotate to, 45, hit enter. Okay, in any case, let me go ahead and undo that. And let's go back to the fill and say no fill. Now you don't have to deal with it at all, okay? Let's go back to solid fill. And then if you want to add text to it, you don't want to make it transparent, just right click on it and go down to edit text. The cursor's flashing in it, so you can type in something spiffy. And then if you want to go ahead and format the text within it, there's quite a few ways you can do it. You can, well, triple click on it to bring up the mini formatting toolbar, or you can come over here in the task pane and select text options and go ahead, and right now it's a solid fill of white. You can change that to, let's do red. Or you can come up here on the Home tab to the font group, and you also get to change it here. We can make it orange. I like red, undo. And then we can change the size, make it a little bit larger. And then as far as the alignment goes, well, it's to the left. I can come up here and make it in the middle. And vertical alignment, well, there's the middle. That was center. Go ahead and select that. Of course, you can always come over here in the task pane to the text box, and you can change the alignment there for vertical. And then mess with the margins. If you have a lot of text, you can have it right next to the margin, or you can kind of buffer it and push it over, or you can click inside and just hit the space key several times. It's up to you. And of course, let's go ahead and delete that so I don't have any text in it. If I want to get rid of it, click outside of it. And if I want to go ahead and have the shape be connected to a cell, after I select it, come up here in the formula bar, hit equals, and then go ahead and select a cell like A1, hit enter. So if I come into cell A1 and type in by, hit enter, well, that's what's being pulled over here into the shape. How about equals 4 plus 2? A simple formula. Enter. Gives me the result 6. Then, of course, to unlink it, let's select the shape, come up here in the formula bar, delete it, hit enter, and it gives me the text in it. It's no longer linked to it, so I can just go ahead and click inside of it, delete it, click outside, and we're back to a simple shape that contains no text. SmartArt graphics are used to visually help communicate information. Those graphics basically contain shapes that you can insert text into, like maybe an organization chart where the top shape you can reserve for the president, then the bottom shapes for the VPs, and then below that, managers and so on. In any case, to find out what SmartArt graphics are available for you to use, come up here and click on the Insert tab, go to the Illustrations group, and there you go, click on SmartArt. And it's divided into 3 sections. The left is for the categories. Go ahead and select one. Over to the right, it's what's available in that category. When you hover over one of the options there, you can see the name that pops up, Basic Process. Select that, and over to the right, it gives you the description of it. It says that this is used to show a progression or sequential steps in a task, process, or workflow. So if I have steps in order to become successful, like the first step, go ahead and do this, the second step through that, one right after the other. This would be a good example as far as using one of the SmartArt graphics to visually communicate this information. Let's go ahead and click Okie dokie, and it adds it. Starts us off with 3 shapes. We can add more or even take those away if we want. And we can actually type the text in the shape itself, or over here in the text pane, You can also type it next to each bullet point. The first bullet point's for the first shape, the second for the second, and so on. So the first bullet point or shape is going to be, well, for being successful is to find something that you enjoy. So in enjoyable work. And you'll notice that when I start typing it, the text starts shrinking to fit the shape here. Also the other shapes, the text inside shrinks up too, so Excel can keep it uniformed. And then to go to the next shape, we can go ahead and select it. And when I select it, it selects the bullet point over here in the text pane, so it doesn't matter. If you want to do it in the pane or over here on the shape, after you have it selected, go ahead and type perseverance. And then the last one is going to be success. So make sure you enjoy it, persevere, hang on, you'll find success. Now, if you missed a step here and you want to add another shape in between these two, like let's say between perseverance and success, then over here in the text pane, I'm going to click after at the end of that word, perseverance, and hit enter to add the bullet point between these two here, and hence the shape in between those two right there. Now, some say it requires some luck, but I say the harder you work, the luckier you get. So I'm going to go ahead and just abbreviate it and call it luck. If you want, you can actually add some subtext or bullet points within the shapes, like I can explain luck. If I hit enter, of course it adds another shape, but after I hit enter, I can hit the tab key and it moves it underneath luck here, so it's within that shape, but as a bullet point. So when I start typing, I don't know if you can read it. It says, harder I work, luckier I get. You can go ahead and expand your SmartArt graphic here by hovering over any one of the resizing handles. It's those white boxes that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, right middle, top right-hand corner, just all the way around it. Hover over it until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then go ahead and click and drag it out and make it larger than life. And if you're done working with the text pane, because maybe that's in the way, go ahead and close out of it. If you want to bring it back, make sure that you have the SmartArt selected so it can bring up its related contextual design tab, because when you click off of it, it disappears. Go ahead and select it, because on the design tab, you can go to the create graphic group. There you go, text pane. Text pane is gone. Let's go ahead and change the SmartArt style. Instead of just something bland or the basics, let's click on more and do 3D polished. I like that. Select that. How about colors? Click on the drop down arrow. We can choose, what's the first one? The pop-up says accent colors. The second one says accent colors 2, 2, 3. Well, in any case, let's select the first one, click on it. And if I don't like one of these shapes colors, but the rest I do, then I can go ahead and select that shape. Come up here, click on the Format tab, go to the Shape Styles group, click on Shape Fill, and let's choose green. Ooh, that's better. And then I can go ahead and add shape effects with that shape still selected. Give it a nice warm, glowing, warm glow. So you can say, hey, perseverance is the key. You can actually, when you hover over the border of the shape, click and drag it, and give it a second, and the arrows will update if you want to move things around there. In any case, I go over this more in depth in my PowerPoint training video, because PowerPoint, by creation, is a visual application. And so while Microsoft added these features in other applications, SmartArt in Excel and Word, well, the main focus for visually doing it is in PowerPoint, but wanted to cover enough in here in case if you want to get started, and if you want to get more advanced or get more detailed about how to format and to be able to work with your graphics, pictures, shapes, then I recommend watching my PowerPoint training video. If you want to layer your objects, when I say objects, any SmartArt graphics, shapes, pictures, we're working with shapes here, it's all the same as far as the steps go, where what you're looking at are 3 simple shapes, because I want to keep this exercise simple. I've got the magenta square that's at the bottom, and I want to bring it forward so it's on top. How can I do that? Well, after you have it selected, come up here and click on the Format tab, go to the Arrange group, and there you go, Bring Forward. You can see when I hover over it, it says it'll bring that object forward 1 level. And how many levels do I have? Well, it depends on how many objects you have within your worksheet. Right now I just have 3 shapes, so I got 3 levels. Blue is on the top level, level 1. Yellow is level 2, and then of course this one's level 3. If I had also an organization chart and maybe a picture, that would be 5 levels, because you have 3 plus the 2. So if I go ahead and click on Bring Forward a level, now it's on the second level, where now the yellow shape is behind that. It's on level 3. Then I can bring it forward again. So level 1 now, instead of blue, which is level 2, is going to be magenta, and then level 3 is the yellow shape. Of course, you can go ahead and click on send backwards one level at a time, but there's got to be something easier to quickly bring a shape forward if you got a lot of shapes or objects to the very top level and not have to keep clicking on bring forward, bring forward. You can click on the drop down arrow and there's bring to the front, boom. Puts it right to the very front of all the other levels. And of course, you can do it by going all the way to the back in a single click. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and resize the magenta shape. I'm going to hover in the upper right hand corner over that resizing handle until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, and click and drag and push that in. And then I click off and I'm like, oh, how do I get a hold of that shape without moving these two here so I can bring it to the front? You can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either go ahead and select one of the shapes and hit the tab key to cycle through the other shapes or objects, and you can see it's selected right there. With it selected, then you can come up here on the Format tab and say bring forward, and your work's done, right? Or you can go ahead and hit undo. You can come up here on the Format tab to the Arrange group and click on Selection pane, and it has a selection of all the objects you can select. And you can see that Rectangle 3 is selected, and I can also go ahead and choose Parallelogram, and then go ahead and say, well, it's already to the front, but let's go back to Rectangle 3 and then bring to the front. That works. And by the way, as I said, you can hit the Tab key, but if you hold down the Shift key and you hit Tab, it goes backwards. So if you have 3 objects here, well, let me go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, and close out of here. When I hit the Tab key, well, it's going to that layer, and then the next layer. If I hold down the Shift key and hit Tab, it goes backwards. Let me go ahead and hit undo so we can get back to where we started here. And then finally, if I like what I see here, and I want to be able to move this over, I don't know, just even like a millimeter, just clicking and dragging puts it off, doesn't it? Let me hit undo. You could say, hey, why don't you go ahead and select all of them at once? That's true. Hold down the Shift key and click on all the other objects. And if you're having trouble selecting all the objects, of course, you got the selection pane. You can see all of them are selected. You can go ahead and, well, let me click off and come over here and hold down the Control key to click on each one of these so all of them are selected. And of course, you can go ahead and hide them if you don't want to see them, show them all if you do want to see them, or do it individually so you can actually hide it temporarily to take a look at, well, what's behind it. In any case, let's go ahead and close out of that. And I'll just do a simple shift click on each one of these, and then you can click and drag it, move it around. But if you have to keep moving it around, shift clicking on each one of these to select all of them can be a bit tedious. So instead, select them all one time and then group them so it sees the shapes as one entire shape. And you can come up here and click on the Format tab, go to the Arrange group and click on the drop down arrow to group, or right click the selection. You want to make sure that you're not moving your mouse when you're right clicking, because otherwise you'll get the shortcut menu to move or copy what you're doing here. We'll click cancel. So hold the mouse still, right click, and go ahead and say group, and there we go. It sees these 3 separate shapes as one shape. Then I can click and drag, click off, click and drag, click off. And then of course you can right click if you need to format these shapes individually and ungroup. And then click off, select one, and do whatever you need to do. A comment is a note that you can insert inside a cell. Like for example, when we invoice a company, or before we invoice them, we'd like to get some information about them, like who we're billing it to, street address, city, and so on. Now it's important that we get a contact person's actual name, because if we don't, after we invoice them, we want to make sure that if we need to do some collections, we have somebody that we can talk to and not just a department where everybody shifts us around and says, I don't know, talk to so-and-so. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and insert a note or a comment here that says, hey, if you're going to invoice this, make sure you get an actual name, okay? So not the name of the company. Now to insert a comment, you can either, well, first of all, select the cell that you want to insert the comment in. You can either come up here and click on the Review tab, go to the Comments group and click on New Comment, and there you go. It's a little yellow sticky note that you can just type in your comment, which is below my name. Now if you're like, hey, wait a second, how did you get your name in there? If you recall in an earlier training video, we learned how to customize or personalize our copy of Office by saying, okay, I want my name to be able to come up in comments, or when we share our workbooks with other people, that when I make a change, they know who made the change. In any case, to personalize it, let me click off in a blank area, hit undo, click on the File tab, go down to Options. The General tab is selected by default, and there you go. Personalize your copy of Microsoft Office. It doesn't say Excel, because what you personalize here, what you add here, affects all the other Office programs that you have installed on your computer. So if I update it here, and I've got Word, I've got Access, I got PowerPoint, it'll update the username to my name here. Okay, so go ahead and type it in, click Okie dokie. So when you add a comment, like I said, select the cell, come up here on the Review tab, click on New Comment, or you can right-click on the cell and you get the Insert Comment option as well. And there you go, there's your name. So go ahead and type in a comment, and we'll say, okay, you notice that when I keep typing, it just scrolls through the text so it fits in the window. So if I want to go ahead and read what's back up at the top of this sticky note, I can use my up arrow key until I get to the top and use the down arrow key to go down to the bottom. Or with the resizing handles that you can see around the sticky note, just hover over one of those until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then click and drag to stretch it out until you can see everything there. Cool. Now it's not going to get in the way. That is, that when you click off in a blank area, you can see that in its place you get this little red triangle. That means that there's a note tied to that cell. That when you hover over anywhere within that cell, and if I select the cell, you can see it goes from all the way over from B to C, that it'll actually pop open the comment and I can read it. Oh, that's nice. So it's not in the way when I'm done, except when I hover over and then hover off, hover over, hover off. Let's see, let's add another comment. So I can show you additional options that tie to the comments here. Let's right click, go down to Insert Comment. Now the customer ID, we can look that up. There you go. You want to look up the customer ID in the database that we have on the server called ClientDB. So when I click off, I've got two comments here, and you can toggle through the comments. I mean, of course, you can hover over it to pop it open, or you can come up here on the Review tab, click Next, and it goes to the next comment, click Next, and when it gets to the end, it says, okay, we're done searching throughout the entire workbook. Do you want to continue reviewing from the beginning? Say okay, so it goes to the beginning. We go Next, you can go Previous, then Next, and then you get the other options. You can edit the comment that you have selected here, and then it just dumps the cursor down below inside the comment, and then you can go ahead and make changes there. When you're done, you can click outside of it. So Next, Previous, we're reviewing. It finished reaching the end of the workbook, click Okie dokie. You can also delete it and it's gone, or let me undo that. And you can right click on it and get the options to edit the comment, delete the comment, even show hide the comment, meaning that when I click on it, it shows it even when I click off in a blank area, and it will keep it up like that until I come back and right click on it and say, okay, now let's hide it. If I want to show all the comments, then I can come up here on the Review tab to the Comments group, click on Show All Comments. There you go. Now, is it going to print off like this when they're up here being displayed? Or can it also print if we go ahead and just deselect Show All Comments? Well, it's a good point, because there are times when I'd just like to print this off without having the comments being seen, because those notes are for me only. And there may be times where I'm working on something that I want to share those comments with everybody else. So the best way to find out is to come up here, click on the File tab, go down to Print, and what you see over here in the preview window is what's going to come out of your printer. Now you can see there are no comments there, so if I go back and I say Show All Comments, and I go to File, down to Print, it's not showing it. If I want to show them here, then I want to come down here and click on the Page Setup link. Go ahead and click on the Sheet tab. Let me click and drag the title bar so I can move the window over. If you want to print comments, it's set to none. We can say either at the end of the sheet or as displayed on the sheet. Let's do as displayed. Click Okie dokie, and there you go. Of course, this one's cut off here because it only prints so much. I may want to click back, and as it's seen on the sheet, select the comment, and I can hover over the border of the comment till I can see a four-way arrow. That means it's in move mode. When I click and drag, I can move it up, down, left, or right. Click and drag this over, put it right there. The arrow's still pointing to the cell here. Let's click on File, go down to Print, and there we go. That looks good. How about, let me click on Page Setup if I want the comments, not where they're at, but at the end of the sheet, and click Okie dokie. So instead of having one page, let's go to Page 2, and let's click on the Zoom to Page feature. There you go. It tells you what cell it's in. A comment was made by me, and then the actual text within the comment, which is pretty cool if you don't want to cover up because you got so much information going back on page 1 that the comments may be hiding up the invoice, the date, customer ID, and so on. Let's go ahead and click on Page Setup, go back to the Sheet tab, and say None. Click Okie dokie. And then we can go ahead and click to zoom out. I don't see any comments here. We can go ahead and go back. And then finally, if you want to go ahead and format the comment, that could be fun. Go ahead and right-click on the border of the comment, go down to Format Comment, and you get a lot of pretty options here. Let's see, you can do the font, change that, alignment, colors and lines. So the fill color, the default is that yellow, typical sticky note color. We could do that. We can do fill effects. Let's go down to fill effects. You can get gradient, texture, ooh, even a picture. Let's select a picture. Let's see, we can browse from file or go online. Let's do that ghost theme again here. I'm going to type in ghost because, I just love running with that. It's spooky, it's fun. Click on insert, there's the ghost. Oh man, he's pretty stretched there, but when I click okie dokie, now isn't that cool? So you can actually format the comments. Let me go ahead and select and deselect show all. So when I hover over it, hey, he's pretty spooky. Let's go ahead and right click to edit the comment. Drag him down here. And there you go. Hyperlinks are used to access external resources quickly, like that of a website. So when I send off my invoice to a customer, if they want to know more about us before they pay us, if I have my website here, they can click on it and it'll take them right to it. So to add the website, the hyperlink that is, just go ahead and type in the URL. You don't have to type the entire URL. Just begin with www.medicalbillingsoftwarepro.com, then hit enter, and voila, it converts it into a hyperlink. And it distinguishes what it converted into a hyperlink from all the other text. Well, because it's a little bit bigger, it's underlined, the color is blue. Also, when you hover over it, you get the finger pointing, which means when you click on it, you can see in the pop-up, click once to follow, and click and hold to select the cell. Also, you can see up above that it added the http:// for us at the beginning of the URL, so we don't have to do that. So if we go ahead and click on it, there we go. There it is. Oh, that's nice. Let's go ahead and close out. Now, if you want to go ahead and edit it in various ways, like for example, the text is too big, the font is not what I want it to be like this cell here. You can see when I have it selected up here on the Home tab in the font group, it's Trebuchet, size 8. So again, follow that lead in the pop-up there that says click to hold to select the cell, because I need to select it in order to go ahead and change the font type. If I click on it really quick, it'll take me to the website. So click, hold until it changes from a finger into the white cross, then let go, and you got it selected. Or click off, you can right click on it, then left click, and you don't have to click and hold to wait for it. Just right click, left click, or let me click out and select the cell next to it. You can arrow into it. I mean, that works. In any case, once you have it selected, then let's come up here and change the font type to, and there you go. You can see after I type in the first couple letters, it selects it for me. I just have to hit enter. And then the size is 8. And you know what? A couple of things is as far as the text being displayed, I can change that, not have the www because that doesn't look professional. And then also, I can actually have the screen tip say something else than what you see when I hover over it in that pop-up. So to go ahead and make changes as far as the hyperlinks concerned, not the actual text, give it a right click and in the shortcut menu, go to hyperlink. Let me click and drag the title bar up. And there you go. We have the text that's being displayed as you see it there, and then down below in the address, the actual link that's not being shown begins with http:// and the rest of the URL. So what I can do is I can say, okay, we definitely got to keep that so it actually goes to the website, but as far as what we see, let's just don't see the www. And then the screen tip, click on it. Let me go ahead and click and drag the window up. You can say, click here to go to our website. I know, generic, right? But in any case, you get the point. Click okie dokie, and okay, so it converted it back into larger text, not the trebuchet that I had. Not only that, but notice how it's flushed to the left. How do I get it to be indented? Because when I select the cell down below and I double click, there's not a space in front of it, it's indented. Well, let me hit the escape key to get out of that. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and hover over it to see what the screen tip says. And there you go. Click here to go to our website. It doesn't give me the clue that if I want to select the text within the cell that I have to click and hold until I get the white cross, but in any case, you can change that out with your own screen tip with a simple right click to edit the hyperlink. So let's go ahead and change this back by selecting the cell to trebuchet, hit enter, size 8, hit enter, and then as far as the indentation goes, if I right click on the cell and go to format cells, let me click and drag the title bar of the window here so I can see it. Let's go to the Alignment tab and let's indent by 1 and click Okie dokie. Hey, that looks so professional. There's to an external website. How about a local document, or maybe we had a database here that they can click on to look up the customer's ID. And then, of course, when they look it up, they may want to delete that link before they send this invoice out to anybody. So if you have an Excel worksheet that you want to create a link that you can click to open up another document, well, this is how you do it. You can go ahead and select the cell, right-click on it, and then go down to Hyperlink. So you'll hyperlink the contents of that cell. And then you got an existing file or web page, and the file is what we're looking for. So let me go ahead and click and drag the title bar up. So what we're looking for is in the exercises folder and any files there, or you can click on the drop down arrow and say, okay, any files on my computer, like on the desktop, but I'll keep it in the exercises folder. Hey, the computer baby. Let's go ahead and do that one. You can do it to an image or another workbook. Layering and grouping. Go ahead and double click on that. So when I hover over it, you can see in the pop-up the address on the computer to that folder, to that actual workbook. When I click on it, there's the layering, close out. Now keep in mind that when I click on it and it says it's not there, it doesn't pull it up, it means that somebody moved it out of the exercises folder, in which case if I need to edit this, right click on the hyperlink, go down to edit, click and drag it up, then go ahead and, browse through your folders there to find it, wherever it's hiding, then double click on it to select it and you're good to go. Let me go ahead and click cancel. And finally, how about emailing somebody? Where you've got the contact manager, that could be me. How about if I just put my email address, leave it as is where it says contact manager, but it will be my email address. So we can right click on it, go down to hyperlink, click and drag, and then email address is down below, select it. Email address is, now I'm making this up, so don't anybody email me, okay? Unless you're going to offer me donuts. Kurt. Now notice when I type in the first couple letters, K-I-R, it automatically adds the HTML text in front of it, mail to, colon. Don't delete that, leave it there because that's important in order for this link to work. Kurt@example.com. I'll keep it more generic. And then you can automatically have it fill in the subject, where you can say that when somebody clicks on this, and they have Microsoft Outlook installed on their computer, it'll open up in the subject heading, it'll say whatever you want it to say. And then of course you got the text to display, which is right here, what you're seeing there. The default, whatever's in the cell, you can change that. You can say it's actually Kurt Kershaw, manager. And then the screen tip when they hover over it, let me click and drag this up. Click okie dokie, and okay, well, you can see that the cell isn't merged with the cell next to it, so it's being cut off here. And click and drag and select it, make my changes by coming up here on the Home tab to the Alignment group, and click on Merge to demerge it, and then click on Merge again to merge it, and then Align Left. And of course I can change the font type as we just learned up here with the medicalbillingsoftwarepro.com link. And there you go, go ahead and click on it. And since this is the first time I'm using Outlook 2013, it's going to ask me for some information to set it up before I can go ahead and email somebody. But other than that, it would just go ahead and pop up. It would have who it's addressed to. It would have my email address in the subject. It would have what we just put in there for the subject, and go ahead and type in the rest of the message in the body of the email. Click send and off it goes. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. We're okay with that. You can also do it to images if you want, or objects or shapes like this right here. Just select it, right click on it, convert it to a hyperlink. It brings up the hyperlink window. Now, because we were doing it as an email address on how we wanted it to link, it's going to default to that. We can go back up here to an existing file within our computer or a web page. If it's a web page, you can come down here and type in the web page's address, www.videotrainingpro.com, hit enter, and when I click off of it, and then hover back over it, you can see in the pop-up the URL. Click on it to test it. Great. And then to remove the hyperlink, just go ahead and give it a right click. Of course, you can open it, edit it, and there's remove, and it's gone. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.